Okay, Sam's Bulldog returning to the trench to discuss what Professor Jordan Peterson thinks of Sam Harris's views on religion. This is a 14-minute, 15-second clip of Peterson on the Dave Rubin show, and I'm going to comment throughout.
People like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, they assume that the natural person is the civilized creature that you see before you in a discussion like this. But
the naturalized person, as opposed to the unnaturalized. Everything in the universe is natural, and there's only one universe that we know of.
I don't believe that. I think that people are far crazier and far more destructive and far greater as well than the typical rationalist approach. Rationality is a surface facade.
Rationality is a surface facade.
That's all. And the idea that people will eventually be rational.
That's all. That's everything, bro.
It's much more likely that they will be irrational than rational. Like you could say, for example, that
yes, humans are irrational, but we strive for rationality if we want to get things done.
Catholicism, let's say, for all its irrationality, was as rational as people can get. If you remove that level of irrationality,
Catholicism was as rational as people could get. So burning witches on street corners for 5 long centuries, as they did in Europe, at the behest of the power structure, or should I say hierarchy, to make this guy happy and his followers. What are you talking about? We were just as rational 100,000 years ago, and perhaps several 100,000 years ago.
That's structural, say. Then everything falls apart and people get so irrational, you can't believe it.
No. We were tired of the irrationality, us meaning humans who cared about the real world, not the prizes after they put you in the ground. Started asking questions because they were dissatisfied with clerical answers to natural questions. That's why some of the best scientists of all time are naturalists. Darwin was a naturalist. I've never looked the word up, but I'm pretty much guaranteed in my thinking that a naturalist is someone who looks long and hard about the natural world around him and tries to draw conclusions about his very accurate observations. He doesn't have a PhD, perhaps. He doesn't have a master's in mathematics, okay, or game theory, or AI, etc. He observes. And boy, do scientists eat up what naturalists come back with.
More rational. Because they, like Harrison and his crowd, think that we were superstitious for thousands of years. Kind of savage and superstitious. And then all of a sudden the Enlightenment came along with the scientific revolution. And poof, we got rational. And since then, things have been good.
I don't even want to repeat that. What? We were irrational and superstitious up until the Enlightenment. 53% of Americans alive today, just like 53% in 1953, don't accept the immutable facts of evolution. Rationality is still in short supply, and it's an imperfect process, something you'll never totally reach, presumably. But we know what we mean when we talk about rationality. Poof, the Enlightenment? What are you talking about? Sam Harris spent months in caves with meditation masters to try to understand the brain states that those guys can get in without drugs, frankly. And even people with drugs can't get there. You don't think that stuff predates the Enlightenment? So irrationality, in the long sweep of history, I guess one could make the argument that we are getting over the long sweep of history, we are getting more rational because we're bumping into each other more and we understand success and failure and so on. I mean, there's so much more collaboration today that you don't need to know everything and reinvent the wheel all the time.
That's not how it looks to me at all. I don't buy that. I think that our rationality, as I said already, our rationality, even our science, is nested inside this large metaphysical structure. This is also...
Our science is nested inside this larger metaphysical structure. It's at this point I want to point out that the word metaphysical is made up for a whole state of something that we can't even, that we at this point can't even postulate exists. We don't know if it's even possible that it exists. So not only is there no evidence for such a ridiculous claim, well, let's move on. If he's trying to make a larger point about how religion helped organize our thoughts through the millennia, well, of course that's true, just like a million other things we did. I mean, almost everybody who ever lived, at least as far as we know, was religious. That has to mean something about us. Doesn't mean anything about metaphysics.
So something that Carl Jung would be an advocate of. That there's an irrational, pragmatic, I would say evolutionarily determined.
Irrational, pragmatic. Yeah, right. There's a train going by, so you're just going to have to let those two words detonate in your brain. Here we go.
Underneath this rationality, and when it goes, then all that rationality goes too. So, yes, you can be a non-believer, but the funny thing about that is too, you can't be a non-believer in your action, you see, because Harris's metaphysics is fundamentally Christian. So
you can't be a non-believer in your action. Sam Harris's metaphysics are Christian. I mean, to me, that's slander. There wasn't anything that made sense there. I don't know if he knows that. But just for the record, me, a billion other people, and Sam Harris reject the whole concept of metaphysical until there's evidence. There isn't any. Zero. Zero, zero, zero. We can postulate other universes. We can postulate gods. We can postulate the truth of Mormonism. Okay? Doesn't mean anything. To accuse Sam Harris of having a metaphysical structure over anything is to be a liar. Now, again, if you are referring to the fact that he grew up in America, and America is religious, and it happens to be Christian and Jewish and Muslim and so on, and that those ideas colored his thinking and have affected the person who he is today, whether he rejected them or not, well, of course that's true. I mean, we need you to point that out. The point is, he's consciously rejecting the outcomes of ideas based on nonsense. For example, extreme example, of course, is ISIS today. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda, okay? What are they doing that Muhammad wouldn't approve in? The answer is probably nothing. And they're following the Quran, the Hadiths that they feel are important, and the vital biography of Muhammad. Talk about irrational. Talk about metaphysics.
he acts out a Christian metaphysics, but he says, well, I don't believe it. It's like, well, yeah, you do, because you're acting it out. You just
Yeah, you believe it because you're acting it out. Now he's trying to claim that Sam Harris is a Christian, and wait till you hear the reasons why. I just listened to this, so wait till you hear the reasons why.
Say you don't believe it,
What
but you believe
do
it.
you mean? What do you mean he's acting? Like what, for example?
Well, he doesn't rob banks, doesn't kill people, doesn't rape, doesn't murder. You know, I mean, look in good in Crime and Punishment, for example.
So you think when you don't do those things, basically the underpinning of it, even though I think I can't speak for Sam, and you guys have had, by the way, regardless of where we get with this, you guys have had, I think, 2 great conversations. One where you didn't quite get there, but one where you've come together, and I suspect you both really relish in that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is someone that you respect, whether you disagree.
Oh yeah, look. I mean,
yeah, I just think that's important to preface because everyone's so at each other's throats all the time that when I saw 2 people that I respect just disagreeing on things but really trying to get there, I thought this is good. And yet there's a certain amount of people that that want you guys to tear each other apart.
Well, there's a good case to be made for atheism. I mean, let's make no bones about it. Mm-hmm. I actually think it's an easier case to make than the alternative. Because you could say, in some sense, there's been 300, 400 years of brilliant scientists who've been doing nothing but laying the foundation for an objective, empirical atheism.
What? Scientists for 400 years have been laying down the groundwork for an objective atheism. No, they haven't. They haven't at all. And a lot of them were believers, starting with Newton, for example, the greatest of all time, who had some really bad ideas. Okay? So, I don't know what that means. I mean, I think I know what you're trying to say, but it's absurd. It's worse than absurd. And now you're saying the case for atheism is actually easier than adopting your quasi-religious bullshit. You seem to think that marrying what you think is science, which you have insufficiently explained in the dozen hours I've heard you speak, anything really. I mean, there are some times when you make sense. You're getting this all wrong, dude. You're slandering Harris and Dawkins. You're putting words in their mouth. And you're not making any good points. So even if you're getting them all wrong, what you're saying is valueless, word salad bullshit. Here we go.
So it's an unbelievably powerful argument. But it's not going to lead to the rule of rationality. See, I don't believe that. Because
do you think anything could get you there? Do you think that somebody could lay out a case that could eventually turn you on this the same way you would want someone like Sam to come around to what you're saying? Do you think?
He just said that we can't get all the way we need to with just rationality. So now he's advocating irrationality. Well, what do you mean? Irrational, I think what he means. I'll put words in his mouth to make him sound smarter. There are believing type brains who believe anything and are faith-based that could have value in our real world. The way they think, the pathways of their brain synapses can look at a problem in a different way and have value. But again, if they're sitting in church praying over it, or telling everybody about a flying Jewish carpenter over it, they're never going to contribute to anything. So those type of minds have to be pressed into scientific service. I don't care if you like the way that sounds or not. You either want to get things done or you don't.
That's even in the realm of possibility.
I can't see how, because it's not like I haven't thought these things through. I mean, I am a scientist. I understand the scientific worldview. In fact, everything that I am saying and thinking about religion is nested inside an evolutionary viewpoint, an evolutionary biology viewpoint, and an evolutionary psychology viewpoint. So I do believe there's a fundamental contrast between a Darwinian worldview and a Newtonian worldview, which is the worldview that I think Sam Harris and his crowd basically have. He didn't agree with that, and it's complicated.
Yeah.
But
Sam Harris and Dawkins have a Darwinian and Newtonian view. I mean, how hilarious is that? Who doesn't have a Darwinian and Newtonian view? Do you live your life like subatomic particles that go zooming around the CERN particle accelerator, and therefore live a conscious life of quantum mechanics? We are large bodies. Everything we deal with, you know what I mean, is a large body object. At its base is quantum mechanics, sure, but operationally that means nothing to us as we live our lives. That's number one, so that was absurd. And Darwinian, anybody who cares about the truth, science, biology, any other concentration of science to do with life on Earth is a Darwinian. There are no exceptions. Darwin may have gotten a lot wrong, I'm sure, but we've learned a little bit since 1856. And again, he's worse than not making sense. He's full of shit. He's not only full of shit, he's lying about other people's views, and he's drawing supposition from a well of nonsense.
See, I guess in some sense, I'm more romantic in temperament than Sam, and I think than his followers too, and because of that, I can see the irrational and malevolent side of human beings.
He's more romantic. More romantic. You either listen to bullshit or you don't. You either have a bullshit detector turned on 11 or you don't. Sam Harris is concerned, presumably, about the same things you, I, and the guy next door is concerned about in this world, and has things to lose, namely offspring and loved ones that are going to outlive him. Hopefully you have the same, etc. And if you don't, there's still a reason to be working towards a better future. So, this is a disgrace. I mean, Rubin should have destroyed this guy.
Believe much more clearly than they can, and I also think I have far more experience with that sort of thing.
Yeah, so do you think that, so we I don't want to get too lost here, but
Yeah.
so we'll try to wrap it up here because there's so much I want to do with you here. So let's say Earth is crumbling, we have two ships. We're going to send the people that believe what you're saying here, basically, that we need this sort of religious underpinning. And then the Dawkins, Sam people, they're going to take their 100 people, you're going to take your 100 people. We're going to go to two different planets and set things up the way they should be. You know, blank slate for each. Well, I guess the part that I would struggle with here is to understand how their ship lands. They're rooted in science and in basic liberalism and acceptance of others and all that. How that society would not flourish from the base level if we could just reset. Now, I think you could make a great argument that we can't do it here because there's just so much history here and all that stuff. But if we were just resetting on another place, why could we not do it that way and have it work?
Well, first of all, you know, there's an assumption.
First of all, that's an excellent question. I wouldn't want to answer that. I mean, if I had his views, which I'm still not sure what they are. But, I mean, the answer is so obvious it's absurd. Let me put it another way. If the world was struck by an asteroid and we had to rebuild again, and I mean really rebuild, we forgot everything. But we were alive, and we started again. Which religion would be here exactly 100 years later? Which religion would have been invented? Answer, none.
Assumption that science and the scientific worldview in some sense has won. No, and because it's so self-evident, let's say, because of what it can produce, that people just will accept it and move forward with it. But I'm not sure about that either.
Of course not. What are you talking about? Science is powerful. You can destroy things that you don't want to destroy with it. And you can make your enemy stronger, and you can try to kill every bad bacteria, and all the while be making their offspring stronger and stronger, so that the armies are always bigger the next time around. Science is a tool. I mean, how obvious is this? Science is science.
I mean, I think there's a strong anti-science movement afloat now.
Yeah, and you're Captain Douchebag.
I don't think there's any reason to assume that a scientific attitude of that sort would be stable. I mean, it's only 300 years old. 400. I mean, people don't like it when I say that because, okay, fine, you can chase it back to some degree to the ancient Greeks, you know.
To some degree, you can trace back science, rationality to the Greeks. How about enormously so? How about, do I need to name them? Measuring the circumference of the Earth 100 generations ago and being off less than 1%. Medicine, tragedy, comedy, acting, architecture, theology, war, painting, sculpture. I mean, philosophy, public speaking. They call it the cradle of Western civilization for a reason.
Barely. Right. But really, it was Newton and Bacon and Descartes, and that's not very long ago. And
400 years isn't very long ago.
We take it for granted, but there's anti-science movements popping up. Well, look, the whole debate over biology to some degree is profoundly an anti-science movement, and not unconsciously so, consciously so.
Yeah, right? Very consciously.
Yes, very consciously so.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's any reason to assume something like that would be stable. There's no evidence that it's stable, let's say, whereas there is evidence for the stability of cultures that were non-scientific for thousands of years, millions.
There is evidence of cultures that were stable, that were non-scientific. Define stable. I mean, you're probably the type who goes around quoting anthropologists all the time. Anthropologists, if they go back far enough, you cannot tell the difference between 10,000-year segments based on the tools and what was left by early modern man. In other words, we were just like we are today, say 90,000 years ago, but 80,000 years ago and 70,000 years ago, the tools and what was left behind looked so similar that it was difficult on that basis to determine how old we were, what we were talking about. And we are talking about hundreds of generations, far beyond the span of modern man. I mean, talk about prehistory. Go back 10,000 years, you're lost in a fog, even 5,000. So this is beyond misinformed.
Millions of years, for that matter, at least hundreds of thousands of years.
There was a lot of war and death involved in those cultures too, but that's sort of...
Yes, definitely.
But I guess that would be your argument, is that this is just the nature of this battle between these two worlds that we live in.
Yeah, well, you know, the other thing that often happens with Dawkins and Harrison and their crew is that they attribute war and conflict to religious motivations.
No, they don't. They specifically say that that isn't the main driver of war. It might be the main driver of keeping us back from better lives if we abandon superstition, because the benefits are so minute and hard to isolate, and the damage is all around us. The damage from 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and today is self-evident. So that's pure slander, or he hasn't listened, which means he's a shitty academic.